The election's over. So, whatever your comments are on the election, please post it in the comments below. I just thought it would be suitable to do a Washington ghost story. Anyways, grab a blanket, turn off your lights for 3 true scary ghost stories that happened at Washington. A fiendish experience. The other night, I was hanging out with my friend, let's call her H. My friends and I usually get together on the weekends to socialize and travel the city. It's a normal thing for us. After our week in school, we get to relax and have some fun with each other. Normally, it's a group about 4 to 5 people, but every once in a while, someone can't hang out because they have something else to do. But this weekend, no one could hang out except for H and I. I was alright with that. It was just a little weird because H and I haven't hung out much alone. Anyways, we met up around 6 p.m. and we walked around for a bit until it was pretty dark. We went to her home and she ate dinner, and we didn't really have anything to do. We decided to just sit in her room and talk, so we did. We sat on her bed and listened to music for a very long time, not doing anything. We were just enjoying the music. We got to talking about a lot of things such as vibes, religion, evil spirits, and different energy types. I like to talk about these kinds of things for some reason. They're just so intriguing to me. I'm sure you can relate. And whenever I find someone else who likes to talk about these kinds of things, it makes me pretty excited. I also consider myself to be a very spiritually sensitive person. I have always thought that I can see a little bit more than what is actually there. This is just what I have come to believe as I get older, and I've been raised to believe that I'll be able to see spirits and communicate with them. As this night went on, we were just pretty tired, anxious, and just plain bored. She was texting her boyfriend, and he was acting kinda weird, and it was causing her to become a little distraught. I didn't think it was much because I usually don't pay attention to other people's relationship problems, and I guess I thought it wasn't a big deal. He then proceeded to tell us that he just took a bunch of mushrooms, and that he gets lost when he does them, which kinda confused and frightened us a bit. We were trying to apply tons of different meanings to what he meant by that, by getting lost. It weirded us out a bit, but it wasn't that big of a deal to us. We were just surprised that he was alone, because both of us have done mushrooms in the past, and we know what that can do to a person, especially if that person is alone. Being alone on them is just a big no-no. I'm sure some of you may know this. Some people prefer to be alone, but not the majority. So after he texted us that he gets lost whenever he does mushrooms, he didn't answer after H called him over and over again. She went on Facebook and messaged him and texted him again and again. Because yes, we were a bit nervous that he took a bunch of mushrooms while he was alone, especially since now that he isn't answering anyone. There was a part of me that just wanted to shrug this off and think his phone died and he fell asleep or something along the lines of that, but for some reason I had this bad feeling, like something bad was happening to him. I kept getting mental imagery of bad things happening to him, and so did my friend H. We shared that we both had a bad feeling about the situation to each other, so I convinced her that we go check on him. It was a kind of a wild and crazy idea at first, since he had roommates, and if we just knocked on the door at about 12 at night, it might be a little weird. Plus, he lived on the other side of town. He lived in a pretty bad neighborhood of town as well, an area known for its crime rates and drug use. But we made our decision. We were going to check on him. Okay, so we drove about 15 minutes until we got to his house, and we parked in front of his house. It was a pretty big house from the early 1900s or something like that. That's how most of the houses in that area are, big and old. We just stared at the house, contemplating if we should get out. We still couldn't believe that we drove all the way over there without his consent in the middle of the night. So yes, we were nervous to go up to the door and knock. We looked at all the windows in the house, and only one of them had the light on in the room, and it was his room. So H was just staring at his window very hard. I didn't get why she was looking so hard at the window. She told me it looked like he was in the window staring at us. So I looked. I saw a weird pattern on his window. I knew it wasn't a person. At first, I didn't really know what it was, but there was a film of water-like substance over his window. It looked like it was glowing or reflective. I was just in awe. I asked her what she thought it was, and she said she didn't know, but it was moving, like it was alive. It was shaking and morphing and bubbling. It was kind of gross looking, actually. It began to scare us a lot as we began to realize that we were witnessing something paranormal. We thought that it could have been a manifestation of negative energy going to her boyfriend in his room, and we were just watching it flow in like that. It was the strangest thing. It's as if the stuff was reacting to stimulus, like there was a force moving and controlling it. I don't know how to really explain it. At this point, we were afraid. We didn't really know if we should just go into the house if there was a negative energy inside the house. We both began to get short of words because of how afraid we were. Then, at the corner of my eye, I noticed a red flashing light. I stopped moving instantly and just stared at it. It was between two houses where it was very dark, maybe about 50 feet between the houses. It was as if it was trying to get my attention, and it did. It surprised me at first, because it was very noticeable. H noticed that I was staring at something, and decided to look where I was looking at. We were both describing what we were seeing out loud, and it was matching up. We were both seeing the same thing. Let me explain to you what we saw. Right under the red light, there was a childlike figure. It was the size of a child, except it was extremely skinny. It seemed as if it was kind of shiny, just like what we seen on the window, yet extremely dark, darker than what we know as dark. It was doing something though. She described that it looked like it was playing while I thought that it was eating. Whatever it was, we were watching it. I remember the feeling of complete terror that came over me. I immediately knew what we were looking at, and so did she. I remember how my heart just dropped into my stomach. I felt an intense anxiety inside of me while I was watching this. It was so frightening. I wish I could explain in words how much fear was pumping through my veins in this moment. There was no explanation to what it was. It was no type of animal, and it was certainly no type of human. It gave off a feeling of pure evil and filth. It was moving as if it knew what it was doing, like it was smart. The thing that made this so weird was where we saw it. It was in complete darkness. Why would something be in darkness right there? What would it be doing? It seemed as if it was also giving off its own little light a little. It looked vicious, it looked mean, it looked rabid, yet it still looked like a person. It stood up on its 2 feet, and it was walking around a bit. It seemed extremely angry or extremely hyper. I then told H to turn on the car and that we need to go now in a very serious tone. Before I noticed that we were there. She scrambled for her keys, turned on our car, and we sped off as fast as we could. I did not take my eyes off of the thing. I was just waiting for it to change or disappear, but it didn't. As we drove away, I even saw it from different angles. It didn't ever acknowledge that we were there, though. We were both silent and pale, and we drove away from the house. We didn't say a word. We were frozen with our fear. She drove a few blocks away to a McDonald's and parked in the parking lot and looked at me. She said, "We need to talk about what we just saw." We were both shaken up and just speechless. We tried to comprehend what had just happened, but it's like we just couldn't. We didn't even want to believe what we saw. I remember just sitting there. I could still see that thing in my mind. It was real. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a game. What we had just seen, it was in real life. The more I thought about it, the more terrified I got. She explained to me that we need to go back because her boyfriend is on mushrooms and is vulnerable with that thing near him. It all began to make sense. That thing was probably there for her boyfriend. When you do mushrooms, your mind opens up a lot. It can make your mind extremely vulnerable to the spirit world, especially to people who don't know what they are doing. The thought of being alone with that thing frightened me so badly, and that's just what her boyfriend was doing. I just said that I couldn't wait at McDonald's while she went back and tried to get in the house. As I was getting out of the car, I just decided I had to go too. I couldn't make her do that alone. I needed to face this situation. This was a complete test of my faith. I was so scared. I didn't want to go back with all of my heart. But we couldn't just leave him there. So we decided to go back. I took my cross necklace off and held it in my hand, squeezing it. We decided to walk to his house, since it was fairly close to where we were. The neighborhood was so dead. It was so dark. All the houses were huge and falling apart. Some of them, the paint was peeling off. It just wasn't a pretty sight. As we were getting closer to his house, the negative feelings were building up, more and more. My heart was just racing. I had my hood on and my head down, because I just didn't want to see anything. When we got to the house, we felt this cold breeze. It was not a windy night at all, but a huge whoosh of wind just slammed into us. It gave us the feeling that we were not wanted in this area. We were right in front of the house, and we were slowly walking to the door when we heard a very loud screaming noise. It sounded like an infant crying. It was just screaming and it was just yelling, and the sound seemed to surround us. It was a terrible voice. It sounded human, yet not human at all. It sounded like the loud cry of an infant mixed with a screaming cat. It was an unpleasant noise. It was not a sound of this world. H ran back to me, and we started to quickly walk away. We stopped, then realized we shouldn't let this thing scare us away, so we walked back and knocked on the door. No one answered, so we left. We got back to our car and reflected on what had just happened. We drove back to his house instead of walking one last time. We parked in front of his house, and we looked for the thing that we had seen before, and yes, it was there still. Except this time, it was still. It was just standing there. It looked kind of like it was searching for something on the ground slowly. It looked discouraged. It's weird how it stayed in the same place to me. Right before we were going to leave, H got a text from her boyfriend asking us if we could come over. How weird is that? We were already there. We were at his house for about an hour trying to find a way in for almost no reason. Just because we had a bad feeling about the situation. So he was fine. He calmed down. He was returning to reality. But he said he went through hell. He was almost in tears because of how scared he was. H ended up taking me home that night. I was so happy to be in the safety of my home. A few days later, H and I met up because we needed to talk about everything that happened that night. We needed to just clarify everything, and we did. She then told me one thing that really freaked me out. She said that her boyfriend almost killed himself that night, that he was so far gone that he almost killed himself to escape the terror. I was just shocked at that, because to me, that explained why that thing didn't want us near the house. I was bewildered. That night taught me not to be afraid in certain situations. Even if you are terrified out of your mind, you shouldn't back down from anything that you feel needs to be done. I still cannot really believe that this all happened. There was tons of coincidences, like the fact that no one could hang out that night except her and I. It was like we were meant to go through all of that. Anywho, what does everyone feel about this? Has anyone had a similar experience? And let me promise you, this is 100% true. This happened last weekend to me. I feel like I finally regained enough courage to actually think about this so that I can post it on here and share it with others. Thanks. A haunting melody. This is one of the many strange and unexplainable occurrences that's taken place at my childhood home. The history of the land on which it stands, it's rather well known. At this point, long ago, it was a logging camp, or a camp for Japanese students, and a Boy Scout camp. Eventually, it was purchased by my grandparents, sectioned off into 3 lots, one of which was bought by my father. This is where my parents' house now stands. The following is one of the more recent instances of paranormal or unexplained activity. During the summer of 2009, I was pregnant and temporarily staying with my parents and my 2 younger siblings. My father was out of town, staying the weekend at my parents' lake house, so my mother and I decided to make it a movie night. We rented Caroline, we got some Chinese food, and started getting ready to watch the movie in our living room. My sister didn't want to watch the movie with us, too busy watching some action movie in her bedroom. I think Mom must have forgotten something in her bedroom, because she paused the movie before it even started and went into the back of the house. My brother and I were sitting in the living room, waiting for her to come back, when I suddenly heard a piano playing faintly. It was a run of 7 notes, forming a melody that I've never heard before, and it sounded as if it was coming from just outside the large living room windows. I looked at my brother, who looked right back at me, wide-eyed. We both agreed that we'd heard the same thing. The sound echoed again, although this time it sounded as if it was coming from an entirely different area, beyond the front door, on the complete opposite side of the house. Stunned and definitely curious, we followed the slow, slightly creepy melody out the living room into the foyer. "It sounds like it's coming from the back," my brother said quietly. I disagreed, insisting that it was drifting away over the yard and towards the woods at the limits of our property. But as I listened, I realized that it sounded as if it was going both ways. The melody seemed to be coming and going from all directions at once. Our mom came out of her bedroom then, and my brother and I quickly agreed to ask her if she'd heard it as well. "Did you hear that?" we asked her as she walked towards us. "What?" she asked. "You mean the piano?" Well, that settled it. My brother and I weren't just going crazy simultaneously. The 3 of us searched throughout the house, trying to find a logical source for the music. We checked the music boxes, MP3 players, televisions, cell phones, and of course the 2 pianos in the house. Anything that could have produced the melody. We questioned my sister, who swore she hadn't heard anything over the noise of her movie. We couldn't find anything that made sense, and we decided that we weren't going to go outside chasing some creepy, invisible music into the woods. "Must have been a ghost," my mom said, shrugging. We left it at that, and went back to the living room, closed the curtains against the darkness, and continued on with our movie. Nothing else happened that night. Time stood still. This is my first time sharing a story, and I think I'll just start off with a big one. Some background on me before I start. I am a biologist and very scientific in nature. I have an inquisitive mind and do not believe that spirituality and science are mutually exclusive. I'm not prone to hysteria or things of that nature either. However, I have experienced many ghost-like phenomena since I was a child. This is one of them. When I was around the age of 12, my family lived in a 60s-style split-level house. My bedroom was on the top level next to my younger brother's room. We had a motion-triggered floodlight that illuminated the backyard for calling in the animals and, I suppose, for intruders. This night, it was around maybe 11 p.m. The light went off, so I looked out the window to the backyard. My bedroom would completely fill with the light when it went off, enough to read by, so you can imagine how it would attract attention even when you slept. I saw a dark figure walking very slowly by my window. It had a strange gait to it, kind of like a floaty, bobbing motion. It was that typical darker-than-dark silhouette that is often reported. It turned its head towards me, and stared for what seemed like hours. The sensation was as if time stood still while he was present. It could have been around 3 hours or 3 minutes. Now, here is where I hope you don't laugh or imagine me joking. It had red eyes and small horn-like structures at its temples, like Satan. I hate to use that image, but it was so perfectly angled with every representation of him that I feel it is useful. He had on a high-collared cloak, and after some time, passed my window towards my brother's window the next room over. I didn't feel too terribly threatened, not as if it might come into the house or anything like that. What's even more strange is that within, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, my brother came into the room saying he had just seen the devil outside his window and was freaked out. It's been over 20 years since that night, and to be the proper big sister that I am, I like to draw the image of the creature we saw and force my brother to look at it. He always gets mad and swears he'll never visit me again. We laugh, but I doubt we'll ever forget. I'm sure most of you know how these things are burned into your brain. So, what do you think? I'd love to hear some feedback, and thanks for reading. I'll post more later.